People don't get obsessed with what is loud. They get obsessed with what they can't place, can't predict, and can't control. Here's the part no one really tells you. Obsession doesn't come from arrogance, drama, or attention-seeking behavior. It comes from disruption. When someone walks into a room with intelligence that cuts through noise, beauty that doesn't beg to be admired, and a drive that doesn't need applause, it quietly rearranges the psychological furniture of everyone watching. People feel it before they understand it, and that discomfort is where fixation begins. There's a well-documented psychological fact behind this. The human brain is wired to fixate on unresolved patterns. When something doesn't fit into a familiar category, the mind keeps returning to it, trying to make sense of it. That's why unfinished songs stay stuck in your head, and why certain people linger in memory long after they've left the room. You represent an unfinished equation to others, not because you're confusing, but because you don't behave the way their expectations demand. Now add beauty to that equation, but not the kind that performs or asks to be validated, the kind that exists without permission. That alone already bends attention. Pair it with intelligence that seeks truth instead of approval, and a drive that moves steadily while others announce every step they take, and suddenly you've created a psychological itch. People can't scratch. They watch, compare, and quietly spiral, all while pretending they're just curious. Here's the slightly funny part. While they're busy overanalyzing your tone, your pace, your motives, and your silence, you're probably just living your life, focused on your next move, wondering why people act strange around you. You didn't sign up to be a mental pop quiz, yet here you are, living rent-free in multiple minds. This isn't about ego, superiority, or being put on a pedestal. It's about what happens when someone embodies clarity in a world addicted to confusion. Intelligence sharp enough to expose avoidance. Beauty grounded enough to trigger comparison. Drive disciplined enough to make excuses look embarrassing. When those three align, obsession isn't admiration, it's exposure. And once people sense that, they can't look away. Number one, your mind doesn't seek approval, it seeks accuracy. You don't think to be liked, you think to understand. That difference is small on the surface, but massive in impact. Most people shape their opinions based on what keeps them accepted, safe, or praised. You don't. You follow logic, truth, and clarity, even when it costs you comfort. That alone separates you in a way people feel instantly, even if they can't explain it. When you speak, there's a weight to it. Not because you dominate conversations, but because you don't fill space with noise. You say things that land clean and stay there. People notice that you're not fishing for reactions, nods, or reassurance. You're not adjusting your thoughts to match the room. That unsettles people who rely on agreement to feel confident. It quietly exposes how much of their thinking is outsourced. This is where obsession starts. Not admiration, not envy at first, but fixation. People replay what you said in their heads later. They wonder how you reached that conclusion so calmly. They sense you're not emotionally attached to being right, which ironically makes you more convincing. You're willing to update your view if the facts demand it, and that level of mental honesty is rare. Most people defend their opinions like fragile possessions. You treat ideas like tools. Your intelligence doesn't posture. It doesn't perform. It doesn't beg to be recognized, and that's exactly why it's hard to ignore. You're not impressed by status, titles, or loud confidence. You're impressed by coherence, by substance, by things that actually work. That makes people feel subtly evaluated, even when you're not judging them at all. The brutal truth is this: people who crave approval feel exposed around people who don't need it. Your presence highlights how exhausting it is to constantly manage perception. You don't need permission to think clearly, and that freedom is magnetic. Some people admire it, Others resent it. Many obsess over it because it challenges the unspoken rule they've been living by. Fit in first, think later. You broke that rule without announcing it, and now, whether they admit it or not, they can't stop noticing. Number 2, your beauty isn't decorative, it's confrontational. Your beauty doesn't exist to soften rooms or make people comfortable. It doesn't act as background scenery or polite ornamentation. It arrives with presence. That's why reactions to you are rarely neutral. People either lean in or quietly tighten up, and most don't even realize why. Decorative beauty is easy to enjoy and forget. Yours isn't. It forces awareness. What unsettles people is that your appearance doesn't ask for permission. You don't perform it. You don't adjust it to soothe egos or make yourself more digestible. There's a grounded confidence in how you carry yourself that communicates self-respect before you ever open your mouth. That alone disrupts unspoken social hierarchies where beauty is expected to be humble, grateful, or self-deprecating. You don't play that role, and it throws people off. This kind of beauty creates comparison, not by intention, but by contrast. People become aware of their own insecurities standing near you. Some suddenly feel underdressed, underprepared, or emotionally exposed. Others start projecting motives onto you that don't exist. They assume arrogance, manipulation, or calculation because it's easier than accepting that someone can simply be comfortable in their own skin. The obsession begins when they realize your beauty isn't your leverage. You're not using it to gain approval, access, or control. You're not trading it for attention. It just exists alongside your intelligence, your drive, and your boundaries. That combination confuses people who were taught that beauty must be exchanged for something. When you don't bargain with it, the power dynamics flip. There's also a quiet authority in your presence. You don't overcompensate with charm. You don't shrink to be liked. You don't exaggerate warmth to offset how striking you are. That restraint makes people read into you more than they should. They analyze your tone, your pauses, your expressions, searching for meaning that isn't being broadcast. The brutal truth is this: people don't obsess because you're beautiful. They obsess because your beauty doesn't need them. It stands firm, self-contained, and unapologetic. And in a world where most people are negotiating their worth in real time, that kind of beauty doesn't just attract attention, it confronts it. Number 3, you move with intent, not urgency. You don't rush, you don't flail. Every step you take is deliberate, measured, and aimed at a purpose only you fully understand. While the world around you frantically chases recognition, distractions, and fleeting wins, you operate on a different rhythm. That rhythm isn't slow, it's precise. It's a cadence that quietly signals control, mastery, and foresight. People notice it instinctively, even if they can't name it, and that's where fascination starts. Most people confuse speed with productivity. They fill their days with noise and motion, as if movement alone proves value. You don't play that game. You focus on the moves that matter, the decisions that compound over time, and the work that builds quietly while everyone else announces theirs with hashtags and chatter. That contrast makes you magnetic. They watch in awe, trying to reconcile your calm focus with the chaos they accept as normal. Your intent is visible in subtle ways. It's in how you listen, respond, and act. You don't answer reflexively to be polite. You respond thoughtfully because it aligns with your objectives. You don't commit to everything. You commit to what moves the needle. That selectivity isn't arrogance, it's efficiency. And that efficiency challenges everyone around you because it forces them to measure their own scattered efforts. There's also a psychological pull to the way you move. Humans are wired to notice patterns, especially those that signal competence and foresight. Your deliberate actions are like a puzzle people can't stop examining. They replay your choices, your timing, and your focus in their minds, trying to understand how someone can seem so effortlessly ahead while appearing entirely unbothered. The truth is, urgency creates stress, intent creates respect. People become obsessed not just because you succeed, but because you make them painfully aware of how much of their life is spent in reactive motion. You don't need to announce your wins or justify your pace. Your calm, intentional presence does the work for you. And that quiet command over your own life is what makes people return again and again, unable to look away. Number 4, you outgrow people without announcing it. You don't make a scene when you evolve. You don't declare your growth or post it for applause. You simply move forward, step by step, idea by idea, standard by standard. And in that quiet progression, you leave behind anyone who can't keep up. Not because you want to abandon them, but because your life naturally expands beyond the limits they've set for themselves. People notice, of course. They feel the shift in energy, in conversation, in ambition, even if they can't put their finger on it. That tension sparks obsession, because your growth is both invisible and undeniable. Most people measure relationships and friendships by comfort and convenience. They want agreement, familiarity, and predictability. You don't. You seek depth, challenge, and authenticity. That means certain people who once seemed central to your life suddenly feel distant, not because of betrayal, but because your evolution no longer fits into their framework, and they can't stop thinking about why. They replay past interactions, compare themselves to your current pace, and try to rationalize the gap. The more they analyze, the more they fixate. This outgrowth isn't loud or confrontational. You don't broadcast achievements or standards to shame others. You simply embody them. You're reading, learning, building, and executing while others are still debating comfort zones and excuses. That quiet difference has a profound effect. It highlights stagnation, exposes mediocrity, and creates a silent pressure that is hard to ignore. People become obsessed because they see what they could have been, had they not stayed rooted in fear, doubt, or laziness. There's power in this natural separation. It signals independence and self-direction without arrogance. It shows that your life isn't contingent on anyone's validation, friendship, or approval. And that is rare, magnetic, and even threatening. People who are left behind can't help but notice the transformation. Your progress doesn't call them to action. It forces them to confront their own choices. And that quiet, unannounced evolution keeps them thinking about you long after you've moved to the next level. Number 5, your intelligence threatens emotional comfort zones. Your intelligence isn't about showing off or winning arguments. It's about seeing clearly, thinking deeply, and refusing to settle for superficial answers. That alone makes people uncomfortable because most of the world is built on emotional shortcuts, half-truths, and convenient illusions. When you enter a room, you don't just observe. You perceive the inconsistencies, the contradictions, and the things people avoid admitting even to themselves. That clarity is unsettling, and it draws attention like gravity. People are drawn to it, but they're also quietly wary. The danger your intelligence poses isn't theoretical. It's practical. It exposes laziness in thinking, gaps in understanding, and self-deception. People who live in comfort zones rely on selective thinking to feel safe. They avoid questioning their beliefs, their choices, and their motives because doing so requires effort and accountability. You, however, navigate life without avoiding hard truths. You analyze situations, people, and patterns with precision. That ability forces others to confront what they've been quietly ignoring, and that confrontation sparks fixation. They can't stop replaying your words, your logic, your calm certainty. Your intelligence isn't performative. You don't flaunt it for applause or validation. You don't over-explain or dumb things down to make others comfortable. That restraint amplifies its effect. People sense the gap between your clarity and their own confusion, and it sticks with them. They're intrigued, inspired, intimidated, and obsessed, all at once. Your presence becomes a mirror, reflecting the truths they'd rather avoid. This isn't arrogance, it's authenticity. You refuse to dilute thought to fit social norms. You refuse to exchange insight for approval. And that combination of honesty, perception, and subtle challenge makes people linger mentally, long after interaction ends. They can't help but analyze your logic, your approach, and your calm mastery of complexity. The reality is that your intelligence doesn't just inform, it disrupts, unsettles, and fascinates, creating a pull that is impossible to ignore. People aren't just noticing you, they're forced to reckon with what it means to be around someone who thinks clearly, feels deeply, and moves with unwavering understanding. Number 6, you trigger projection without trying. You don't push people to feel or act a certain way. You don't manipulate, perform, or demand attention. Yet, people project onto you automatically. They see in you the things they struggle with, the traits they lack, and the ambitions they've abandoned. Your clarity, discipline, and self-possession act like a mirror, and most people can't handle seeing themselves reflected so honestly. That's why they fixate. They aren't obsessed with you. They're obsessed with the version of themselves they see when they're around you. Projection is a subtle but powerful force. When someone observes you moving through life with purpose, confidence, and restraint, they can't help but insert their insecurities into your story. If they've been lazy, indecisive, or afraid to follow their own goals, your presence highlights it. If they've compromised their standards or settled for comfort, you become a reminder of what they gave up. That mental projection feels personal, even though it's actually about their own failures and fears. They replay your behavior in their minds, trying to decode why you do things differently, why you stay calm, why you're untouchable by the drama that consumes them. The ironic part is you rarely need to act. Your self-assurance, intelligence, and focused drive are enough to stir these reactions. You don't lecture, compete, or criticize. You simply exist in alignment with your values, and that alignment makes others uneasy in a way they can't articulate. They feel compelled to analyze, imitate, or question you because you've exposed a void in their own lives without ever trying. This projection is what makes obsession so invisible yet so intense. People return to you in thought repeatedly, trying to solve a puzzle that isn't about you. It's about themselves. They mislabel fascination as interest in you, admiration as envy, or curiosity as attraction. And yet, the truth remains. You didn't ask for this. You didn't create it. You simply live authentically, and your existence forces others to wrestle with the parts of themselves they would rather ignore. That silent power, that ability to spark deep introspection without a single effort, is magnetic. And it's what keeps people thinking about you long after you leave. Number 7, you don't chase attention, and that rewires power dynamics. You don't perform, advertise, or scramble for approval. You exist, and that's enough. In a world where most people equate visibility with value, your refusal to chase attention is revolutionary. It flips the rules they've been taught. When everyone else is shouting to be noticed, you quietly occupy space with focus, purpose, and authenticity. And suddenly the room, or even their thoughts, leans toward you. They're drawn not because you demand it, but because you've made them notice without asking. That's a power most people never understand, and it creates obsession without effort. The effect is subtle, but undeniable. People accustomed to controlling influence through noise or charm find themselves confused, off balance, and unusually attentive to someone who doesn't need validation. They watch your calm confidence, your measured actions, your ability to operate independently of the chaos, and they can't place it. They start trying to decode why your presence commands notice without theatrics, why your words carry weight without persuasion, and why your life seems so aligned while theirs feels scattered. That curiosity becomes fixation. By not seeking attention, you assert control in the quietest, most effective way. You dictate the terms of interaction simply by existing on your own frequency. Others attempt to pull you into their drama, their games, or their expectations, but you remain untethered, and that detachment unsettles them. People are drawn to your energy because it's self-contained and intentional. You've demonstrated that influence doesn't require performance. It requires alignment with your own standards and priorities. The brilliance of this is that it highlights the imbalance in everyone else's approach. They realize they've been exhausting themselves, bending over backward for approval that isn't required. Meanwhile, you move with precision and intention, and people can't stop returning in thought, trying to understand your magnetism. They replay your calm, your choices, your silent authority, and the obsession grows. You've taken the most overlooked path, self-reliance and quiet mastery, and turned it into power. People notice, they fixate, and they can't ignore it because your life operates on terms they've never dared to set for themselves. Number 8, your standards expose other people's compromises. You don't need to announce your rules, your expectations, or what you will and won't accept. You live them, and that alone is enough to reveal the compromises others have quietly made. People around you begin to feel it almost instinctively. They notice how you refuse shortcuts, how you prioritize quality over convenience, and how you hold yourself accountable while others make excuses. It's not judgment, it's observation, and that reflection is uncomfortable for anyone who's settled for less than they're capable of achieving. Your standards aren't rigid rules imposed on the world. They're an extension of your clarity and self-respect. You move through life making choices that align with your vision, and those choices illuminate the gap between your discipline and someone else's compromises. Someone who has been cutting corners, lowering expectations, or avoiding responsibility can't help but feel exposed around you. They sense that quiet measuring of themselves against your example, and it triggers fascination mixed with a subtle resentment they don't fully understand. The magnetic pull comes from the fact that your standards aren't performative. You don't flaunt your discipline to make anyone else feel small. You simply embody it. And in doing so, you become a living benchmark, a silent mirror. People find themselves comparing their own behaviors, their own choices, and even their own dreams to the life you quietly cultivate. That comparison keeps them mentally engaged with you, returning to analyze what makes your approach different, how you stay consistent, and why you refuse to compromise for convenience, comfort, or approval. This is why obsession starts. People are drawn to what they secretly admire but also resent. Your life exposes what they avoided, delayed, or ignored in themselves. It's not personal, it's inevitable. When you set high standards for yourself without begging the world to notice, others notice anyway. They can't help but track your moves, reflect on their own compromises, and feel both inspired and unsettled at the same time. Your integrity, discipline, and unshakable standards create a force that is quietly irresistible and impossible to forget. Number 9, you operate from internal permission. You don't wait for someone else to validate your choices, approve your ambitions, or grant you the right to exist fully. You move because you have already decided it's your time, your path, and your responsibility to yourself. That independence is magnetic, because most people live tethered to external approval, seeking nods, likes, compliments, and reassurance at every step. You've escaped that trap, and that freedom is both fascinating and unsettling to those still chained to expectation. Operating from internal permission means you define your own rules. You don't bend to social pressure or compromise your values for temporary comfort. You take action based on your standards, not someone else's checklist of acceptable behavior. That clarity makes you difficult to categorize. People around you notice it immediately, even if they can't articulate why. They sense that you're not negotiating your life for anyone else, and that realization triggers a silent, persistent curiosity. They observe, compare, and sometimes question how someone can be so unapologetically themselves in a world that rewards conformity. The power of internal permission isn't flashy. It doesn't need drama, attention, or performance. It's quiet, relentless, and consistent. Every decision you make, every goal you pursue, and every boundary you hold reinforces the fact that you answer to no one but yourself. That energy, calm, deliberate, and untouchable, forces others to confront their own reliance on approval. Your life exposes the compromises they've made, the compromises they continue to tolerate, and the self-imposed limitations they quietly obey. People are drawn to you not because you demand admiration, but because you embody something they secretly crave: freedom from the invisible chains of expectation. You move with autonomy, think with clarity, and act with intention, and that combination is unforgettable. Obsession forms because others see in you a blueprint for the independence they lack, yet they cannot replicate it. You've already given yourself permission to live fully, and in doing so, you make everyone else aware of the limits they've accepted in their own lives. That awareness sticks, it lingers, and it makes you impossible to ignore. Number 10. Your drive isn't loud, it's consistent. Your ambition doesn't announce itself with fireworks or dramatic displays. It doesn't need social proof, likes, or applause to exist. Instead, it's steady, deliberate, and unshakable. While most people burn energy on bursts of effort followed by distraction, you operate on a quiet, relentless rhythm. You show up every day, doing the work that matters, building momentum in ways that aren't flashy but are far more powerful. That consistency alone creates fascination because it's rare. Most people are drawn to noise and drama, mistaking it for productivity. What makes your drive magnetic is that it's self-sustaining. You don't need constant motivation from others or validation to keep going. You follow through because you understand that results are born from persistence, not performance. Your actions accumulate silently, compounding into progress that's visible to those paying attention. People notice it subconsciously. They see the quiet victories stacking up while they're still scrambling for immediate recognition. That contrast triggers obsession. They can't stop tracking your progress because it highlights their own inconsistencies and unmet potential. Your consistency also signals mastery. You're not distracted by trends, opinions, or temporary setbacks. You stay committed to your goals, refining, adjusting, and improving as you go. That focus creates a kind of quiet authority that people instinctively respect and fixate on. They can't help but analyze how you maintain such discipline, how you stay calm under pressure, and how you turn intentions into tangible results without fanfare. The brilliance of your drive is that it operates independently of perception. You're not trying to prove anything. You're proving it to yourself. And that makes the energy around you magnetic. People are drawn to the tension between their own scattered efforts and your steady momentum. They watch, they calculate, they internalize, and in doing so, they become obsessed with understanding the mechanism behind your quiet power. Your consistent drive doesn't just build your future, it makes you unforgettable, because the world can't ignore someone who moves forward without needing anyone's permission to do so. Number 11. You're comfortable being misunderstood. You don't feel the need to clarify every thought, defend every action, or explain every decision. You understand that not everyone will grasp your perspective, and that's perfectly fine. Most people panic when they're misinterpreted, scrambling to control perceptions or gain approval. You don't. You know that your energy, intentions, and priorities exist independently of anyone else's understanding, and that freedom makes you magnetic. People are drawn to what they can't fully decode, and being comfortable in the gray area of misunderstanding creates a quiet obsession. Your lack of explanation isn't coldness, it's clarity. You've realized that every time you try to make someone understand you completely, you're investing energy in someone else's limitations. Instead, you let your actions, consistency, and values speak for themselves. That restraint is disarming. People notice it instantly because it defies the social norm of constant justification. They're used to people negotiating for approval, adjusting behavior to be palatable, and explaining themselves endlessly. You break that pattern without effort. Being comfortable with misunderstanding also gives you a subtle power over others. They project their interpretations, assumptions, and biases onto you, often revealing more about themselves than about you. They replay your words, your actions, and your presence, trying to fit them into their own framework, yet the truth remains untouchable. You don't validate or correct every perception, and that uncertainty keeps people returning mentally to analyze, reassess, and fixate. This quality is rare and unnerving. People are obsessed not because they fully understand you, but because they can't. They're drawn to the mystery you embody, and the restraint with which you carry it intensifies their curiosity. Your life doesn't need their comprehension to thrive, and that independence highlights the difference between you and everyone else who seeks constant approval. By embracing the fact that some things about you will always be misunderstood, you've created an aura of intrigue that is impossible to ignore. People linger in your orbit because they know they'll never fully grasp you, and that tension makes you unforgettable. Number 12, you don't mirror people to make them comfortable. You don't change your tone, posture, or behavior to fit the expectations of others. You remain unapologetically yourself, regardless of the room you walk into or the people you're around. Most people unconsciously adjust themselves to match those they want to impress or feel safe with. You don't. That refusal to conform, to perform, or to accommodate creates a subtle tension that draws attention. People can't help but notice someone who exists independently of their validation, and that awareness sparks obsession. Your authenticity isn't loud or performative. It's quiet, deliberate, and consistent. You don't mimic attitudes, opinions, or emotions to gain approval, and that authenticity makes interactions with you unpredictable in the best way. People find themselves wondering what you truly think or feel, and that uncertainty pulls them in. They replay conversations in their minds, analyzing every word, gesture, and pause, because you never spoon-feed familiarity or comfort. You make them work to understand you, and that challenge is addictive. The effect of not mirroring goes deeper than curiosity. It exposes projection. People project their expectations, biases, and insecurities onto you because you refuse to accommodate them. Your independence forces them to confront the gap between their assumptions and reality. That gap is what creates fascination and fixation. They can't control you, and their inability to do so makes you occupy their thoughts far more than someone who conforms would. By refusing to mirror, you also create a form of quiet authority. You don't negotiate your identity to please others, and that makes your presence commanding without effort. People may feel uncomfortable, intimidated, or intrigued, but they can't deny the pull. It's a reminder that real power doesn't need validation. It exists simply because you do. Your refusal to mirror is not arrogance, it's mastery over self. It signals that your life, decisions, and energy are yours alone. That independence is magnetic, unforgettable, and impossible to ignore. People don't just notice it, they obsess over it, because it reminds them of the freedom they've yet to claim for themselves. Number 13, you walk away before attachment turns into identity. You don't confuse closeness with control, presence with possession, or connection with obligation. You understand that people, situations, and opportunities are not extensions of your identity. They are temporary companions on your journey. Most people tie themselves to people and circumstances as if losing them would erase who they are. You don't. That subtle self-possession is magnetic because it's rare. People notice that you move through relationships and connections without dependency, and it creates a tension they can't ignore. Walking away before attachment overtakes your sense of self doesn't mean detachment in a cold sense. It means boundaries. It means clarity. It means knowing that you will never compromise your identity for proximity. You stay aligned with your values, vision, and growth, and you make choices that reflect that alignment, even if it requires leaving behind what others cling to. That discipline is confusing to people who equate attachment with love, loyalty, or influence. They fixate on you because they sense freedom in your choices that they've never allowed themselves. The pull of this behavior comes from the balance you maintain. You're connected enough to engage fully, care deeply, and contribute meaningfully, yet you remain untethered. That balance makes people reflect on their own insecurities, dependencies, and attachments. They replay your decisions, trying to figure out how someone can care without being consumed, how someone can influence without being possessed. That analysis fosters obsession because it's easier to fixate on your autonomy than to examine their own attachments. By walking away before attachment becomes identity, you create space for growth, for yourself and for others. You demonstrate that relationships and situations are tools for expansion, not prisons. People are drawn to this clarity and strength because it exposes the compromises they make out of fear, comfort, or neediness. Your ability to love, engage, and detach simultaneously is a paradox they can't resist. It makes you unforgettable, magnetic, and occupies their thoughts far longer than someone who clings would ever. Number 14, you represent possibility, not fantasy. You're not a fleeting dream or a caricature of perfection. You're tangible proof that intelligence, discipline, and self-respect can create real results. People are drawn to fantasies because they are unattainable, but they obsess over possibility because it challenges them to evaluate their own lives. You embody what most people claim they want, but rarely pursue: clarity, ambition, and action aligned with vision. That presence forces attention, reflection, and sometimes discomfort, because it's both relatable and aspirational. The power in representing possibility lies in your authenticity. You don't exaggerate achievements, overplay charm, or pretend to be someone you're not. You live according to your principles, take deliberate steps toward your goals, and demonstrate what consistent effort looks like in the real world. That combination is rare. Most people talk about potential without realizing it, but you show it. And seeing someone operate in that zone of real, tangible progress ignites fascination. People can't dismiss you as a dream or a story. They have to reckon with the reality of what you are achieving. Being a living example of possibility also forces others to confront their own choices. They see how much time, energy, and talent they've wasted chasing convenience, comfort, or approval. You don't make them feel guilty, but your existence highlights the gap between their current reality and what they could achieve. That tension is intoxicating. It pulls people into your orbit because they can't stop analyzing, comparing, and wondering how someone manages to turn ambition into consistent results without drama or excuses. The brilliance of your presence is that it inspires without manipulation. You don't need to motivate, teach, or perform for an audience. Your life is the proof. People are obsessed not because you're unattainable, but because you're possible. You exist as evidence that discipline, intelligence, and self-respect yield results. And that makes your energy unforgettable. You remind them of what they could become, and that reminder lingers far longer than fantasy ever could, because possibility has the power to challenge, provoke, and transform. Everything we've explored here isn't just about being admired or envied. It's about existing in a way that is unapologetically real, disciplined, and alive. You aren't defined by what others think of you, but by the clarity of your mind, the depth of your intelligence, the strength of your standards, and the precision of your drive. Each point we've discussed, from moving with intent, embracing your power, and staying true to your values, to representing possibility rather than fantasy, paints a picture of a life lived on your own terms. People are drawn to that life not because it's flashy or performative, but because it challenges them, inspires them, and forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've neglected, feared, or compromised. You carry a presence that commands attention silently, a magnetism that doesn't need explanation, and an influence that doesn't demand applause. You're proof that mastery of self, consistency, and authenticity are forces far more powerful than any superficial charm or loud performance. You don't just walk through life. You move with intention. You evolve without announcing it, and you set standards that reveal the quiet compromises of everyone around you. In embodying intelligence, beauty, and drive, you create ripples that linger long after you've left the room. People notice, they reflect, and sometimes they even obsess, because you remind them of what is possible when someone refuses to settle for mediocrity. If you found these insights powerful and eye-opening, don't keep them to yourself. Subscribe to the channel to unlock more content that inspires and empowers. Like this video if it resonated with you, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and drop a comment to let us know which point hit you the hardest. Your engagement fuels this community and ensures more people can step into their own extraordinary power. Stay blessed always.